So, welcome to our very first podcast on threewoes.com. We're here today to kind of make Revelation simple. I don't know about you, but it's always been hard for me. And Barney here, who is our host today, has done extensive research on this over the past decade plus. And so I'm going to let him introduce himself. I'll introduce myself. And then I'm just going to start asking him some questions. So, Barney, I'll turn it over to you and let you kind of introduce yourself.
Right, thanks, Gary. I'm Barney, and started working on Revelation a number of years ago. And this is, as Gary said, this is our first podcast introducing the Making Revelation Simple podcast. So this will be our premiere video. And what we wanted to, I think, we planned on kind of talking about today was how this all got started. And so maybe we just kind of jump into that and kind of go from there and see what we got. So anyway,
So
about I'm
let,
sorry.
let, let me jump in here with some stats. I did some research, and what I found interesting is back in 2021, Lifeway Research did a survey amongst U.S. Protestant pastors. And so think about this, in the middle of COVID, they surveyed pastors, and 59% of those pastors surveyed said their views have not changed since seminary or Bible college. And only 31% report some change in their view. So whatever they learned or were taught in seminary or Bible college, that has stuck with them. Likewise, when they surveyed the public at large, 57% of those people agree with whatever church they attend, whatever their views are on the end times. And roughly 14% are say there's been a little change in their views. So what I find interesting is that the Protestant pastors that they surveyed, whatever they learned in seminary or Bible college has stuck with them. And that's what they're preaching. And whatever they're preaching, the people that attend their church, that's what they're believing. So that's kind of an interesting stat. And you, Barney, I mean, you've attended seminary, and with your 10 years of research, just walk us through this journey on how you came to write the Three Woes, which is a 4-book series, and we'll make that link available to our audience. But then this concept of making Revelation simple, because it has never been simple for me, and yet you have found that it is simple. So tell us about your journey.
What happened was I started studying Revelation actually back as a young teenager. I'd listened to preachers on the radio that would talk about prophecy and end times and found it very interesting. But I also, just like what you're saying, I found it confusing. And through my life, after going to Bible college and seminary, studying, I would kind of go to every time somebody was preaching on Revelation or Daniel or prophecy, I would try to go and take in the study. And what I found is much like what you just said, the person would go through their material and I really enjoy the study, but I'd come home each time and grab my Bible and try to walk through what they were teaching. And I found that never did I get very far before I found some scriptural conflict that if this is so, then this violates this scripture over here. And that was very discouraging to me. And then about probably 12, 15 years ago, I was invited to go to a Bible study. So I went to this gentleman's house who was hosting the Bible study. And after we'd been having it for a number of weeks, one night I kind of hung around and was talking to him at the end. And we got to touching on prophecy. And I made the comment to him that I loved Revelation, but it was difficult to understand. And his response surprised me. He says, it's not difficult at all once you understand how to read it. And what came out of that little conversation was he offered to come over to my house and walk through how to read Revelation with me. Well, he came over the following Monday morning, and he and my wife and I sat at the kitchen table, and for about 3 hours, he went through Revelation. And when he left, I thought that sounded pretty good. So I did with him like I did everybody else. I went and grabbed my Bible after lunch, and I started going through what he had taught, and lo and behold, I didn't find any conflict scripturally. Now, we didn't get all the way through the whole book of Revelation, but we got a good start, and it made more sense to me than it ever made before. So that's really where the birth of the three woes came from, though I had no concept of what the three woes were back at that point in time. Actually, what this gentleman did, his name was Randy Wills. About that same point in time, he was writing a book and he came out with it, and he called it The Seven Seals in Prophecy and in History. And there, I think I got a good picture of it there on the screen.
Yes.
And what
Yeah.
he did, you have a question?
No, I just said, yes, I see it. It's good.
What he did in that book was he presents, and that's part of what he did when he sat at the kitchen table with me that day when he came to my house. He presents that the seals in Revelation are actually the same as the signs that Jesus gave us in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, when he said, look for these signs. They will mark the preceding of my coming. I'll show you how near it is. And that's what Randy went through with the seven seals in Revelation. He said, those are the signs that Jesus told us to look for. They're not part of the Great Tribulation. Now, the problem with that is that's a subjective view. I could think it's part of history, and somebody else could say, oh, no, that's part of what's in the future that's going to come in the book of Revelation. And it's really, which one do you want to believe? And that's kind of where it went. And we studied together. What ended up coming out of that one morning meeting when he came to my house, for the next several years during the summer, we'd get together once a week for about 3 hours a week, and we would study Revelation and Daniel and anything prophetic, the Old Testament prophets. And finally, after a number of years, actually about August of 2019, Randy or somebody discovered the three woes. And what the three woes do is they give you a prophetic timeline within the book of Revelation, something we've not seen before, and it pins down and it confirms Randy's hypothesis that the seven seals are also the same as the seven signs that we're told to look for in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So that's kind of the history behind that, and that's where I started my journey towards writing the three woes.
So you kind of mentioned timelines there, and kind of being important. So you started meeting with him, what, back in 2010 or 2013?
I tried to go back and check and see when it was we started meeting, and I think it was right about the time he wrote his book, and his book was published in 2013. So I'd say we met and started meeting with each other probably around 2013, maybe 2014. So, and then we met for several years.
Sure.
And then he actually is the one that told me I did not discover the three woes. And for people that are listening and don't know what the three woes are, they're actually what's talked about in chapter 8, verse 12 of Revelation. An angel is flying through the midst of heaven, and he's announcing the three woes that are about to come upon the world. And as you read that verse, he actually ties those three woes to the next three trumpet judgment angels that are about to sound. Mm-hmm. And you have to read through many chapters of Revelation, but it gives you a full picture of what's happening. It builds a timeline within Revelation that most of us have all missed.
So Barney, back up a little bit, and as you did, research on your own, as you were trying to compare other pastors or other teachers' comments about the book of Revelation, can you give me an example of something you went out and really compared to Scripture to double check to make sure it fit your belief and their teaching?
Well, my teaching originally, I didn't mention this, but when I first started studying with Randy, I was a very staunch mid-tribulation believer. And I think a lot of that was based on the fact that when I would read Revelation, chapter 6 sounded like it was the rapture of the church. But we have been taught in seminary and taught in churches and by pastors that these seven seals are all part of the Great Tribulation. They're all part of that 7-year period. So when I saw that the first seal was opened in chapter 6, verse 1, and then the rapture looks like it takes place over in chapter 6, verse 12, made me a mid-tribulation person. Whereas Randy had, from the time I met him, he had always been a pre-tribulation person. And most people who believe in pre-tribulation, they put the rapture of the church back at Revelation chapter 4, verse 1, which would put all these seals in as part of the 7 years of great tribulation. So I had to totally rethink where I was coming from in order to get the book of Revelation to have a common sense understanding to me.
So then, during that summer of 2019, as you're meeting, you have this major breakthrough with the Three Woes, or discovering that. Tell us what that was like. How did that change you, your views, your understanding?
Well, the first thing that came out of that really was in August when Randy shared the concept of the Three Woes with me.
Mm-hmm.
I sat down, and I'm a great person for charts and trying to look at things visually. So I started mapping out the book of Revelation, chapter 1 through chapter 22, and trying to, this part is an introduction, and this part is prophecy, and this part's about the New Jerusalem, and this part's about future. So I started doing that. And what I did, I built a chart and I called it How to Understand and Read the Book of Revelation. And that took several iterations. I got probably about 90% of it right with the first doing of it, but then it took 2 or 3 additional doings to kind of rewriting of this chart to clean it up as revelations came to me and you began to see, oh, this works this way or this works that way. So that was kind of the beginning of it. And then after that, actually, a lot of my writings, when I had written these 3 books called The Three Woes, or 4 books, all came from just a happenstance encounter. I had a guy that my wife bumped into, him and his wife, and they were having trouble with their TV and internet service where we were living. And she said, oh, my husband's very good at that. He worked with computers. So I went over to this gentleman's house to help him get his internet and TV stuff set up. He was a renter in this home and got it all set up and working for him. But as I'm doing that, we found out we were both Christians, and he started asking a question about this or that, and I started answering it. And it became a question and answer session the whole time I'm working on his TV there for about 40 minutes. And when I got done and was leaving, I looked at him, I said, I can't do this one-on-one with everybody. I probably should write a book documenting this so it can be shared with other individuals. So that's where the beginning of my writings came from.
So that was instrumental in kind of nudging you to write your first book. And since that time, you've written 4 books in the Three Woes series, and your last one is The New Jerusalem, correct?
Correct. Yeah, the first book, I wasn't sure whether I could even write a book or not. It was maybe a little rough coming out. It has some good data in it, and I actually rewrote it last summer. The last 2 books I thought are the best of the series. The one, I actually wrote the books out of order. I wrote book 1, I wrote book 2. And at that point in time, I thought, I think I know enough about Revelation that I've been studying it and really digging into it for years. I think I could write a commentary on the whole book of Revelation. So that's when I started book 4, which I called The Three Woes, a Revelation commentary. And got through it. Had one in particular, a real stumbling block. I got into chapter 14, and I had a hard time understanding it. And what's interesting is that chapter 14, since I didn't really understand what was going on, and it's hard to write a commentary and skip a whole chapter of that commentary, I went to other people who had written commentaries. And I probably pulled up, between what was online and what I had in my personal library, probably about 15 different commentaries. And what I discovered on chapter 14 of Revelation was each one of these people who had written a commentary in their life had a different view. There wasn't anybody that agreed with each other. And when I got done reading the 15 commentaries, I didn't agree with any of them either. And I still didn't have an answer. So what I did was, probably for about the next week, I spent off and on all day long. I'd read the chapter 14 and I'd pray over it. And I'd read and I'd pray over it. And amazing, at the end of about a week of doing that, all of a sudden I'm reading it. And as I get done reading it, it's like, there's the answer. It was just like God gave the revelation. And it was so simple. And after I saw it, it's like, how did I miss this? This whole week I've been reading it. How did I miss it for all the years I've been studying Revelation? But that's how God opens things up to us if we're willing to seek him in prayer and dig and work at it.
So in all your research, just study with Randy and others, what was the one thing that really made Revelation jump out or simple for you?
It was really the three woes. The three woes puts everything into time perspective. If you start into them, the three woes actually begin their timeline begins at chapter 9, verse 1. And as you follow through all the remaining chapters until you get to chapter 16, verse 17, that's where the three woes kind of end their time frame. It puts everything into perspective. Um, and part of what makes things confusing in the midst of all of that, as you get into those three woes and studying them, you'll find timed activities in these, particularly in the sixth and seventh trumpet judgments. As those angels are sounding, they'll say such and such. John tells us that such and such took place, and he'll tell us that this took 5 months, or this took three, and actually he'll say it took 3.5 years,
Mm-hmm.
or 42 months. And then what you begin to see until you really get it mapped out, you begin to look at it, and it's like, oh, these look like these are all a bunch of activities that took 42 months or 3.5 years at a time, and they're backed up one after another because that's how the angel told the story to John. He could only hear one story at a time, and then hence John wrote down these stories one at a time. And then when we read them one at a time. And what that does for us, it looks like it's a long sequential story that continues going. And we kind of miss the fact that there are 3.5 years and 3.5 years, 3.5 years. And actually, what you'll find in the angel, the sixth trumpet judgment angel and the seventh trumpet judgment angel, there's 5 activities that each take 3.5 years. Well, if we count those years up, that comes to 20.5 years. And there's nowhere in the scripture that 20.5 years marries up with anything. But when you look at all these activities, 5 of them that are 3.5 years apiece, what we find is 2 5.5 years or 3.5 years end up in the sixth trumpet judgment angel, and then 3.5 year activities end up under the seventh trumpet judgment angel. And when you put them that way and you realize these activities are happening simultaneously within their trumpet judgment angel, then you now have 2 3.5 year time frames with a bunch of things happening concurrently. And that now reveals to us the 7 years of what we typically call the Great Tribulation. But we miss it unless we look at it this way. And that's what the scripture offers us when we look at the three woes.
So really what I hear you saying is the three woes really helped bring everything into perspective when you think about signs, seals, trumpet judgments, angels, all the different things happening in this vision that John had that he wrote about in the book of Revelation. It really fits it more in a concise timeline when you look at it through the view of the three woes.
And that's true. It takes something. What I saw the three woes do, like I said, Randy's concept that these seals could be part of our history, not part of our future activities, and that are all tied to the 7 years of Great Tribulation.
Sure.
And the three woes pins that down and makes that a certainty when you look at it. I've only ran into one guy that looks at the three woes and says, I don't understand it or I miss it. What most people do, they look at it and they say, wow, never saw that before. I've had people that have sat under some of my teaching and they'll say, I need to listen to this class again. There's so much there and you can't get it all at one time. But it changes their thinking. And that's what it really takes to understand Revelation. We have been taught so many things that are inaccurate, and we just need to look at it and take a fresh look. And if we take a fresh look, all of a sudden Revelation becomes so easily understood and it makes so much sense. It's just a world of difference when you look at it that way.
Well, that's good, and that's really what you hope to do with these podcasts is to get that information out so others can review it for themselves and test it against Scripture, and see if they come to the same conclusion, and help others to make Revelation simpler and more straightforward as they do their studies and worship or whatever. So that really kind of brings us to where we want to jump off. And then next week, can you kind of highlight what you would like to, where you'd like to start next week so our audience and listeners can maybe anticipate what you're going to talk about next week?
Absolutely. First thing I'd like to kind of mention is I'd invite people to be certain to subscribe to our channel and our podcast here. Go out and visit the Three Woes website, which it's very simple. It's threewoes.com. That's the number three and WOES. Try to get that to show up there. And and make sure they do that. And that way they won't miss. What I want to do, I'd like to share my screen, I think, at this point in time, and I kind of show people a little bit about what I'm talking about.
Good idea.
And let's go into this, and I think we can capture and bring up where I had some of this open here. And here's the chart I had talked about when I had, may have to kind of reframe this just a little bit. But here's the chart I had talked about when I said my first chart, which was done back in 2000, in August of 2000. And what it does, it takes chapters 1, 2, and 3, and 4 and puts it here. And then here's all that middle section of chapters 5 through 18. And that's where the seals start. And I show the seals. And then out of the seals actually is what kicks off the trumpet judgment angels. And then after the seventh trumpet judgment angel, that's where the vial of bowl judgments kick off. And like I said, it took about 3 or 4 iterations to get this chart really cleaned up. So we're going to go into details of this and show how the Three Woes proves this in our next podcast. And I'll share one extra quick little video here, not video, but chart. Here's another chart I done. And this is where I was talking about things happening simultaneously. Here's the sixth trumpet judgment angel, and here's the activities that go on in his thing. Each of these up here where this bar and my cursor's showing are 3.5 years apiece. And then over here for the seventh trumpet judgment, you got the same thing, 3.5 years. But what they're actually doing, these activities are taking place simultaneously, as shown down here on the bottom of the chart. And we'll go in and explain things like that next week. So that's what I kind of like to leave them with, and have this up as well. So, and we'll talk a little bit about Revelation and the Three Woes and the 4 books that support all of that. And they're all shown right here on this video, or this screen here. And this comes from part of my teaching that I do it out at various churches.
Yeah, and I just want to state that I've read all 4 books. I think my personal favorite is the New Jerusalem, maybe followed by the Revelation commentary. But very eye-opening, easy to read, and you kind of recap at the end, almost like in a study guide form. And what I found myself doing is, even as I read through the book, going back to other sections, comparing and contrasting to different things, and then actually opening the Bible and doing just like you did. Do I agree with this based on what I'm reading? So I think it definitely helps, and it's exciting to look forward to that and the journey that you're on, and sharing this with others, especially at the time we're in right now. And I think it's enlightening and helpful. And really, most of all, I think it's hopeful. So look forward to sharing this journey with you. And just remind everyone, threewoes.com, the numeric 3, WOES.com. And a lot of great information out there. And we look forward to seeing everyone next week. Barney, anything you'd like to say as we close?
Absolutely. Go visit the threewoes.com and be sure and subscribe to our Making Revelation Simple podcast. And that way you get notified and won't miss out on the teaching that we'll do next week.
Sounds great. So until next week, we'll see you then.
Super. Thanks, Gary. Have a great week.
You too. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.